Hello, good morning, everybody. Morning for people calling from the US or from the Americas, and more afternoon in Europe and elsewhere. Welcome to another webinar of 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀. Very excited myself to welcome David Vogelpohl, CMO at FastSpring today. Welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Thomas, one of the co-founders here at 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀, responsible for sales and customer success. And the topic we have today is around SaaS pricing strategies to fight stagflation. Stagflation, you might wonder, what does that mean? I won't explain it myself, therefore we have David, obviously one of the experts in the areas. But why do we have this topic today? We're obviously in an uncertain economic climate. You've heard about recessions, layoffs, fundraising being tougher than, let's say, a year or two ago. So we can all use a more positive message and some tips maybe on how to survive, but especially also thrive today. That's why we have indeed David here, and very excited to have FastSpring is representing FastSpring on the call. It's about, let me think, 2 or 3 years we're already working together. So they currently have quite some metrics and interactive dashboards live using our technology. So that's why we couldn't have a better expert in the space on all things pricing strategies, with a lot of subscription businesses already using their platform. So without any further ado, happy to hand over to David. He will dive into the topic with much more passion and details. And just on a practical note, let's have an interactive session. Feel free to ask any questions. I guess you can only use the chats, but fire away. The goal of David and myself is to have a lot of interaction, questions, instead of having rather a unidirectional conversation. So welcome, David. Welcome to all of you. And hand over to you, David. There we go.
Thanks, Thomas. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your partnership with our dashboards and analytics at FastSpring. It's such a critical part of our platform. But what I'm going to talk today about, as you pointed out, is SaaS pricing strategies to fight stagflation. And to give you a little context on where I'm coming from, as Thomas pointed out, I'm Chief Marketing Officer of a company called FastSpring. And pricing and packaging optimization is particularly interesting for us because the more money our customers make, SaaS, software and digital goods companies, the more money we make. So that's one of the ways pricing and packaging plays a role in my current role. I came to FastSpring from a company called WP Engine, where pricing and packaging was a big part of my focus around things like product launches, ARPU optimization, maximizing our market share, and of course, even the very tricky acquisition integration pricing and packaging, but a wide variety of decisions and audiences focused to help that company grow. And then I owned and operated my own agency, and pricing and packaging was really critical as we worked with our customers because we were trying to maximize LTV to CAC. And the more LTV you have, the more CAC you can spend. So that was a critical part of how we helped our customers grow. But what we're going to cover today is really these three areas. We're going to cover what even is stagflation and why is it particularly important to SaaS, why pricing and packaging optimization can have the most leverage for growth in your business, and how to optimize your P&P, like specific tactical tips to actually help drive growth during times of stagflation. Now, you might be wondering, though, like what even is stagflation and why does that matter? A simplified way of looking at it is like this. Basically, there's actually three components to stagflation: low growth, high inflation, and high unemployment. But as a SaaS company, you might be thinking about really these two components, which is around low growth, less money coming in, and inflation, more money coming out. So there's more pressure than ever on the wallets of your customers you might want to attract, or existing customers that you might want to get to upgrade as you think about your pricing and packaging strategy. And so this becomes very acute as you think about how to approach growth in your business. Now, of course, one way you can deal with inflation is just raise prices yourself. Over a third of our customers, FastSpring's SaaS, software, digital goods customers, raised prices in the last year. It's a popular move. As a matter of fact, SaaS companies tend to raise prices higher than the rate of inflation. So this is definitely a lever that you can pull in your business. And surprise, surprise, companies that increase their prices generally increase their revenue. I don't know if anybody's in the chat. I think I can see the guy in the back. He's like, increasing prices raises money. Thanks, David, right? So obviously, this is a lever you can pull, but you're in a tricky environment where customers have, less money to spend. And so, as we think about pricing and packaging, one of the interesting things to me is it's one of the most routinely under-optimized levers in SaaS. And so, as you're thinking about growing during, uncertain economic times, you think about different levers you can pull, and you might be trying to increase acquisition, increase your conversion rates, or reduce your churn. And sometimes certain types of efforts towards those ends are a lot of work, a lot of cross-functional work, a lot of time and energy, where, as Patrick McKenzie points out, pricing typically requires replacing a smaller number with a bigger number. Now, McKinsey here is waving a magic wand. It's not quite as easy as that. Anyone that's raised prices or changed prices knows that. But what you really need to think about is finding that organizational leverage in your business. So if you're thinking about an acquisition strategy and you're thinking about product-led growth, you're thinking like, I need to create a new product. If I want to reduce churn, maybe I need to fix bugs or make it easier to leverage my products. These can be large or medium-sized projects. You can also involve customer success or sales or other mechanisms to try to drive growth in your business. And a lot of the times, pricing and packaging can be one of these smaller t-shirt sizes. But of course, McKinsey waving his magic wand isn't going to change the fact that sometimes that small t-shirt size is actually a big. When you change prices, you have legal considerations, you have to worry about churn, support implications, plan cannibalization. The list can go on and on. So it's not quite as easy as changing a small number to a big number, but there is operational leverage, and sometimes small is big in the return. And so this is what I mean by looking for that operational leverage, which is what are the things that don't require a lot of work that have a more immediate or bigger or as big payout. Those are the items that you might want to consider, giving some priority in your roadmap. So what are we going to do though, right? We know that generally there's operational leverage with pricing and packaging, but we also know we're in an environment where our customers may have less money coming in and more money coming out. Thomas, I'm going to pause on this one.
Sure.
Is this a pressure you've heard, through either SaaS customers of 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀 or just generally like this pressure? Like it's still early days, maybe on some of these headwinds, but is this something you feel is
Yeah.
prominent?
What's interesting here is we continue growing from Kamilar perspective. It's obviously harder compared to a year or two ago. I think that's something which you obviously can read about and hear about in the news these days. I think what's also coming back is obviously customers, they use our technology, they like it, but they're of course engaging and asking if we could be a bit more lenient. Is it in payment terms, in applying any indexation, or taking into account any other elements towards the next months or years to come. So those are more frequent discussions we have these days compared to some a year ago. So it's the growth within our customers, which obviously are also B2B SaaS players, is something that's also stagnating on their ends, once more than the others, but it's definitely something that we're experiencing in sales, but also customer success conversations.
Exactly. And so, you were kind of pointing out that if you're focused on B2B, they're probably cutting back their budgets, right?
Mhm.
Especially as you start pulling into 2022. And so that's going to put pressure on acquisition. It's going to put pressure on upgrades. If you're selling to B2C companies,
Mhm.
you're B2B, but the companies you're selling to are selling to consumers, or you're selling it to consumers, then general inflation on the consumer price index, all of these factors kind of go into the pressures. And so a lot of people do start thinking like, what is my survival what plan? But I think as you pointed out earlier, there is an opportunity to grow despite these pressures. And so as you think about growing, as you think about your pricing and packaging strategy, it's important to remember what side of the growth mustache you're optimizing for. Now, the growth mustache is this sideways bracket that one of CFO I used to work with used to always use on their sides. And he didn't call it the growth mustache, but it looked like a mustache to me. But the idea in your SaaS is that growth is driven by new MRR, so new customers coming in, and then net revenue retention. How much of your existing customers' MRR, ARR are you retaining, or even better yet, growing? And if you have over 100% net revenue retention, that's a multiplier to your profits. It's all in revenue, but it's also a
Mhm.
multiplier to your valuation. So as you think about pricing and packaging, like, am I trying to affect both? Am I just trying to affect new? It's important to understand where you're aiming and how you're going to optimize for that. And then, of course, you have a variety of things that you can try, combinations of different SKUs or entitlements or pricing approaches in order to unlock that revenue. And I'm going to go through some specific tips here in a minute. But I just want to remind you to look for that operational leverage, maybe coming up with a persona plan that's a little bit higher ARPU or something. Maybe that's approachable for you. Maybe adding an add-on or just lowering the price, but look for those points of leverage where you're going to get, outsized returns for, maybe undersized effort. But as we dig in, what should we then start thinking about in, an environment where customers have less money coming in and more money going out? So the first thing you need to think about is, what is your value metric? And the way I like to think about it is, why do users really value your product? And I actually love Google Workspace. We use it here at FastSpring.
Mhm.
But I wanted to kind of pull up their plans for a minute to kind of illustrate a little bit about how to think about value metrics, and where this example actually doesn't necessarily lean in very heavy on that front. So I'm going to do the mouse. Okay, good. You can see my mouse.
Mhm.
So we can see that, the usage metric for Workspace fundamentally is a seat-based user metric. So we're charging per person that's using Google Workspace. Now, when it comes to things like stagflation, remember how we talked about one of the three elements is low unemployment. So if your customers are doing layoffs, well, then your revenue is going to go down. So this metric is actually very sensitive to things like stagflation because it's based on people count. So that's one thing to think about, is like, what is that value metric? And for Google on these, it's basically the user. We also have the storage, but no story around what am I going to use that storage for. It's very kind of a bland and utilitarian usage metric. And we see that we can have more participants in meetings, which is maybe more value related, meaning that I can have a bigger meeting. So when you think about usage metrics, try to answer that question. I can do X, I can have X. And so this is really rewarding the kind of objectives the person might want to do, where this is kind of more utilitarian, and perhaps um, terabytes and storage are kind of decoupled from things like unemployment that might be depressing per user counts. And so as we think about like the example from Google there, the Google Workspace example for a minute, where you have, let me go back to it actually so we can see it, but you have, different types of meetings. Like, one problem is, like, if you need a 500 participant meeting, do I really need to upgrade every user in my org to get that one big meeting? Thomas, how many people in your company participate in these webinars and might need more than a 100 participant video meeting?
Yeah, indeed. I think uh, internally, you mean, or just
Yeah,
external
internally, like,
webinars?
the people that run these things, like 5 maybe, like, max out of your whole company.
Yeah, we run these. That's maximum five for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were using Google for this, you'd have to upgrade everyone in your company for this. So if you're thinking about customers that don't have a lot of money to spend, this is a really great segue to say it's time to reconsider add-ons.
Mhm.
Now, this is a revenue dashboard from FastSpring, which is actually powered by 𝘄𝗵𝗶𝘶. And what it's showing is a collection of revenue for both kind of the base subscription amount and then the add-on amount. So, you can see the different colored boxes, but this is the way you could think about add-ons, as a way to add more boxes to your total revenue growth. Add-ons offer an easier path to increase your ARPU for both existing and new customers on a budget. So that if they don't want to spend, double their price per seat or something to get that 500 person meeting, you can offer that as a standalone add-on.
Mhm.
Another tip I like to
David,
have.
if you don't, we got a question in
Oh
actually
yeah.
from Mikal. Thanks for asking. What would be the pricing or value metric for an analytics SaaS product like 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀, coming himself, I guess, also from a similar analytics field?
Yeah, I think I give some examples actually in a minute, but I
Okay.
think a value metric would be like, what are you going to accomplish with it?
Mhm,
What types of views are you going to be able to see with it? What sort of um, departments might you be supporting by providing that type of reporting? And again, maybe the way you bill for it is usage based, maybe it's just access, but when you talk about it, it's like, I want access to that analytics product so I can do X. And
mhm,
that's even though your usage metric might not be a value metric, at least as long as you talk about it and what they're going to do with that report. What people want is not better reports. They want better reports so that they can do X, and that X is in one of the ways I like to think about defining your value metric.
mhm.
I hope that was a good answer, Thomas. I guess Mikhail, did you say? Maybe you could post it in.
Mikael, yes.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Ah,
Keep the
there he
questions
is.
coming. By the way. Oh,
Yes,
there we
thank
go.
you, he said.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Please keep the questions coming. Love the interaction. So another thing to point out is that the Google Meeting thing, they already have that capability. It might not be a lot of engineering work in order to break that off as an add-on. So as you think about what add-ons could you offer in your SaaS, look at existing entitlements and maybe you could slice one of those out and just make a new SKU versus, needing to make a whole new product. Of
Mhm,
course, add-ons are often preferred by customers because of their ability to choose more in price and features. But add-ons do come with risk because they can kind of depress your upgrade MRR because less people are, upgrading to that $18 seat. But you can have your add-ons and eat them too. You can use add-on bundles to make sure you have a good ARPU. You can have different types of add-ons, and you can actually get to some pretty meaningful increases in MRR with an add-on strategy. As a matter of fact, some people, it might even spend more than the next plan would charge them in your plan tiers. So carefully measure the impact to upgrades and downgrade rates as you start to leverage and introduce add-ons. Again, add-on bundles can increase your ARPU, and then especially when customers have kind of high price sensitivity through stagflation or inflation or just generally. One thing I like to do with add-ons is wait until after the customer has signed up. So they're choosing a plan initially, right? Like I don't know, silver, gold, diamond, or something like that. Let them choose the plan, let them sign up, and then later pitch them on the add-ons. It will help with your net revenue retention numbers because those will count as upgrades depending on the time frame when you cut that off. But it allows the customer to enter your product at a cheaper price point and then later help you build that MRR and ARPU through those add-on upgrades.
That's a good point, actually. It might be relevant for more people on the call. It's actually something that we're internally debating. If you have indeed those three packages, silver, gold, diamond, or platinum, would you then rather advise to have all customers start on the silver one and then take them on a journey to the second, third one later on? Or would you rather advise to go, let's say, as high as possible to have early on more revenue, but then make sure that, I don't know, with the customer success team, that there's an adoption in terms of usage and features on the second or third package?
Yeah, I think like my objective is to get the most MRR out of the scenario.
Of
And
course.
so I think like in general, I'm trying to get as high an ARPU as possible when they're coming through the door. But if I have over 100% net revenue retention, then I know that once I get them through the door, they're going to make more money. Now you're trying to optimize for both sides. But when the audience is price sensitive, keeping their MRR lower in the initial one can give you an advantage in terms of gaining market share. I
Hmm.
actually have a slide in a minute on
Okay.
ways you could consider tiers, but generally speaking, personally, as long as I'm not foregoing too much market share, then I'm generally trying to get as much ARPU as possible right
Hmm.
when they come through the door.
Okay.
Now, they can come through the door and I can upsell them later. That's okay too. But yeah, generally, that's how I personally think about it.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so let's talk about success. And of course, success is spelled with three S's. And really, I make this point because often when we think of pricing and packaging, we couple our innovation S curve. If you're familiar with it, The innovation S-curve talks really about technology adoption. I make something, it kind of chugs along, then it goes into mass adoption, then it kind of tails off. Well, for a lot of folks, especially when your plans are tied to features or products, um, it requires you to make a new feature or product in order to have a new revenue S-curve. So in other words, they're coupled. What you make in technology is coupled with what you make in revenue. But with revenue and with pricing and packaging and different SKUs and different add-ons and different plans, you can create these additional S's in your growth by leveraging new ways for customers to engage and purchase from your platform.
Mhm.
So again, new feature-based plans and add-ons create new revenue S-curves, if you will. But if you also couple that with a usage metric based on, a value metric that have overages, those existing or those new plans and add-ons themselves can increase ARPU over time. So if we kind of go and look at this example from Canva, we see that, they're basically largely feature-based plans. And we can see that there's a usage-based metric here under storage. And so if I need more than, I guess, look at it, they're both 1 TB, right? So what happens over 1 TB? And is there a path where I could actually maybe buy incrementally on certain features based on usage that would make me end up basically paying more for this Canva Pro plan versus switching the whole service over to the Canva for Teams plan? And so my point is, if you look at Canva's plans here, they're effectively feature-based plans that require you to, want the next set of features in order to upgrade versus having a value metric kind of usage overage model that maybe gives you a reason to upgrade beyond just choosing the feature. So again, look for those opportunities to create additional S's in your S-curves. Thomas, you asked about the plans and progress, and this is the
Exactly.
slide I was kind of referencing about. But one thing to think about, obviously, in terms of boosting your ARPU is what are your plans? And of course, in this example from Salesforce, you kind of start over here at $25, and then you go to $150 and $300. And so you're thinking, how do I get more N of customers, and can I get higher ARPU? Well, you can see in between this plan and this plan, there's a gap in that price so big you can drive a truck through it. I remember the COO made this point in a meeting once when we were looking at plans. And of course, Salesforce is smart. They have a plan in between. And we can see that I don't have to jump from $25 a month per seat to $150. I have this nice little in-between step. And so, of course, the goal here is that when people come on board, they come on board here instead of here. Or if they're a customer on this level, maybe they upgrade to here. And there's a little dance that goes on. It's called the ARPU dance. And so some customers that would have normally come in at starter come in at professional. Some that normally would have come in at enterprise will go down to professional. And so when you're thinking about introducing a new tier, it can be very helpful for increasing your overall ARPU, but watch those downgrades, watch the depression that it'll have here, and then think about how you're going to promote it to internal and external audiences. Maybe it's something you don't spend a lot of time promoting internally because you're worried about downgrades, but it may very well be that there's a tier in the middle that will help you increase your overall ARPU while preserving your overall N. Segment plans. We talked about this a little earlier. The company I worked for in the past is a managed WordPress platform, and they managed all kinds of sites, a hosting platform, if you will. And one of the things we noticed was that many of our customers run a plugin called WooCommerce. And WooCommerce has specific kind of platform needs and technology needs. And we had a lot of this platform and technology stuff that we could package into a standalone pricing and packaging plan set. And then over time, incrementally add product value to that. And this is a way to look at your own audience to basically say, what segments of my audience are there? And is there plans that I could publish that are specifically relevant for that with technology I already have, technology I could add to it in order to boost overall ARPU? And that's exactly what we did here. And it was wildly successful. And they've done more things like that since then. Going quick here, because I know we're a couple minutes running hot here. But next up, I wanted to talk about payment frequency. Annualized or quarterly pricing really gives customers, of course, the benefit of a discount versus playing, flat rate per month. But of course, it's also a powerful lever for you to reduce your churn rates and improve your overall LTV. So if you're not doing annualized pricing, definitely something to consider today. If you do have that lower churn, and obviously getting the money up front helps in a lot of other ways, you can look at providing aggressive discounts for new customers or even existing customers who are switching from monthly to annual. This can be another great strategy, especially when you have less money coming in, to try to get those annual prepayments up front. Another nice tip: notice that HubSpot's enterprise pricing starts at $3,600 a month. For a lot of enterprise companies, that's below their procurement department's requirements to
Hmm.
go through the procurement
Interesting.
department. So they can just swipe a credit card and go. What do you think,
I-
Thomas?
is the 5K a month, is that a like well spread benchmark from your experience in
Um,
terms of enterprise? I mean, like procurement, yes or no?
I have
So
not seen a
60K a year.
study
Yeah.
on many companies that do this, but this is an old agency trick as well. They would price their services like on a retainer so that it was under 5K, so they could just swipe the card, but over, and it varies.
Yeah.
Maybe HubSpot did more research and they felt 3,600 was the magic number. But for a lot of orgs, there is like a limit to when you have to
Hmm.
go through a procurement department. And if you can price under that, it might be easier to get folks signed up.
Interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Do you have any thoughts on the actual numbers being displayed? I remember when we went to our initial pricing iterations, I'm specifically around 800 and 3,600, so ending up on a decimal, so to say. There's some research, some advice to have your prices ending up on a 5 versus a 9 versus eventually an intermediate number like a 7 or a 4. Do you have a strong opinion on that?
I think I don't know like what the going consensus is on what everybody thinks the right ending value is. 7 was the kind of dominant force for a while. Nines and fives obviously have had their day.
Hmm.
I think it's best to understand, and pricing and packaging is one of the hardest things to A/B test. Like on a website, you would just A/B test it, right?
Hmm.
But I think really you need to understand what's best for your business.
Yeah.
But there is very strong data to say that if you had 799, that would be better than 899. Now 97 versus 95s, I haven't seen any studies that like definitively prove the
Hmm.
right thing. But if you can come in at least under like a 799, 97, 95, then it changes that 8 into a 7, and like
Yes.
that definitely changes
Hmm.
people's perceptions.
Clear.
Um, Great call out. All right. Thomas, did you know that inflation isn't flat?
Really?
Yeah, it's
No.
not. It really isn't.
No,
We can see
nice.
it bounces all over the place here, right? In any particular place, but of course it's different based on countries.
Hmm.
And so as you think about your pricing and packaging, as you think about the pressure that different regions might be under relative to their inflation, relative to their willingness to pay, you might not need to fear raising prices as much, depending on what geography you're
Hmm.
focusing on. And so in this example, and of course, this is only what, 5 countries, China had the lowest over this time period. This isn't as of this month. It was like towards the end of 2022
Hmm.
when I pulled this graph from the Financial Times there. But my point is that as you think about your pricing and packaging strategy, it's important to think about willingness to pay, inflation, and other kind of, I don't know, financial headwind type issues as it relates to geography, because not all of your geographies might be experiencing things in the same way. And a matter of fact, localization is a big part of how I think about removing purchasing friction, which is even more important when budgets are tight.
Hmm.
So first and foremost, obviously, you want to accept the preferred payment methods of your customers. And if you're
Yeah.
largely focused on one region and haven't optimized for other regions, you might be missing out on opportunities. So one thing a lot of North American-based companies will often overlook is SEPA payments in Europe, which is a
Hmm.
critical payment method, which is kind of like if you're from the US, it's like a debit card, but it's effectively the European equivalent. So if you're not if you have customers coming out of Europe and you're not accepting 𝘁𝗶, that's an example of where you can facilitate that and actually have a material outcome on the growth of your business. And of course, this varies by different geography, different currencies, so on and so forth. We talked about looking at inflation data and willingness to pay based on geography. So of course, that means you might want to be localizing your prices. Now, of course, that gets a little weird because we live in the internet age. And if someone sees you're selling the exact same thing for a lower price, even after foreign exchange, then they're going to be like, why does that country pay less than me? You're going to have to justify this. So that is the challenge there. And then certainly localized currencies. Again, really what you're trying to do at all times, but certainly during times of financial headwinds, is make it easier for them to say yes. Don't make them pay in a currency they're not familiar with. Don't make them pay with a payment method they don't prefer. These are all going to be barriers that are going to be in addition to the budget constraint barriers you're going to potentially be feeling with your customers. I think we have time for Q&A. I've been trying to go as quick as I can here, Thomas, but I'm going to just make sure we leave folks with 3 points, though. Number one, find organizational leverage in your pricing and packaging strategy. Look for those small t-shirt size with the $3 or $4 signs. Test different combinations of factors. So giving you some specific tips today, but just think about all those variables. Test for ARPU, acquisition, of course, net recurring revenue or net revenue retention, and using that to drive revenue growth. And then, of course, success is spelled with 3 S's. And your plans and your add-ons can be additional revenue S curves to give you additional engines of growth in your business. All right. We're on to Q&A. I know we've had some live Q&A, Thomas. Do we have anyone? How does this work? You tell me.
Yeah, Miki will also check, or we'll see if other questions come in. Maybe there's indeed, let me see, a question tab. Maybe it's another one coming in. But maybe on my end, if you could go back to your is it the pricing mustache you call it, or the ARR mustache?
The growth mustache?
Yeah, the growth mustache, indeed. I'm curious. But first of all, yeah, thanks a lot. I think there's, even for us, quite some good pointers to take away in our continuous pricing packaging reflections. But from your perspective, if in terms of strategy, would you recommend picking either of the two to focus on as a company or as a specific team, or do you think it could also work out in a good way if you would have a strategy for acquisition being new ARR and eventually expansion being NRR? Any strong opinions there?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on your situation. So if you're looking at like net recurring or net revenue retention and you don't have a lot of customers in revenue, you might not want to focus on the NRR side.
Hmm.
But if you focus on the NRR side, every dollar you get through the MRR side becomes more valuable over time. And so let's imagine we had 125% net revenue retention. Well, that means for every dollar we get in, that revenue is actually going to grow, at 25%, depending on your NRR rate, time span. But let's just say every year, and so that means the new MRR is more valuable.
Yeah.
I like strategies that focus on both, though. But if I'm doing like an add-on, again, I might wait until after they sign up to pitch them on the add-on.
Hmm.
And so it might very well fall into the NRR bucket, even though I'm aiming that new customers, maybe adopt those add-ons early on. I'm also a fan of spreading bets. So if you can have a new plan that people can upgrade to that's higher cost
Hmm.
and sign up for initially, well, then you address both sides of it. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's how I like to think about it.
Good point. Mikael is thanks, Mikael. Very active. Here's a second question coming from him. Not sure if you can read them, David, but I'll read it out. What would be the first step or steps of determining pricing model for a new SaaS product from scratch? Would you go for more experimentation or for more customer research? Anything else to consider?
Yeah, I mean, certainly competitors, like, is there something that is identical to what you're selling and it's, an in-kind competitor? Obviously, that's
Hmm.
going to be a baseline for your pricing decision. You certainly can do customer interviews and come up with your pricing and packaging plans and do user research and see how people reply and respond to that. I think the one thing I would, recommend that you get as close as you can during that type of research is getting real people that really would want to buy your products.
Mhm.
If your product is niche or has a specific kind of buyer, I don't know, I'm going to make something up here. I don't know, an IT admin at an enterprise company, like maybe IT admins in general aren't good enough. Certainly, people off the street that don't have that role might not be good enough to make that decision. The other thing you can do is you can pre-sell it. So if you have a sales team, they could maybe try to pre-sell some of it, say, hey, we have this coming out. It'll be around this price point. But if it's a brand new product, obviously competitor research. And then again, that value metric, what is it worth to them, right? Not like what is it worth? And I think that's when we look at like storage as a usage metric,
Mhm.
people often get to, well, how much does storage cost? Like nothing, right? Why would I pay for that? But if you reframe what you're storing and the value that it's delivering in addition to the software you've added on top of it, then people are more willing to pay for that out of value. But you're trying to price for the value you deliver, not just like cogs plus on what it costs you to deliver it.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. Mikael, does that answer your question? I know there were actually three questions at once, but I hope you got
Yeah.
an answer to what you were asking for. All right. Let me see if there's still in the question in the chats. Not necessarily. Okay. Any further questions on the audience here? Anybody else? Some question. I know we're slightly over time, at least presentation wise, but not sure if there's further questions coming. Otherwise, David, yeah, thanks a lot for your time. The valuable insights, the three takeaways at the end. Really appreciate that, and looking forward to to next steps in our partnership as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Thomas.
With pleasure. Thanks everyone for coming. Have a great rest of your
Bye,
day.
everybody. Thanks, Noah.